Hello and welcome to the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, registered dietitian, running coach, marathon runner, and mom. This season, we're breaking down running's biggest trends, hot topics, and myths, and turning them into practical nutrition and training advice you can actually use every day. Let's get into it. Hey runners, before we get into today's episode, I want to ask you a quick question. Have you ever wondered if your nutrition is actually helping your running, or is it actually holding you back? If you want to find out, I've created a brand new free resource just for you. It's called the Runner's Fueling Audit. It's a super quick checklist that's going to help you spot the signs of underfueling, low energy availability, or where the gaps in your nutrition might be that are impacting your recovery and actually slowing you down. It only takes a few minutes to go through, and by the end, you're going to know whether or not your fueling is on the right track, or if you really need to start making some changes to the way you approach your eating so you can start to feel stronger on every run, reduce your injury risk, and actually get the results that you're training so hard for. You can grab your free copy right now by clicking on the link in the show notes. Again, this is called the Runner's Fueling Audit. It's a free downloadable resource, and it's going to give you so much clarity on how you can start feeling smarter and running stronger. All right, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I, of course, am your host, Stephanie Natchuk, and I'm excited today to be sharing my thoughts on the Garmin Plus new nutrition tracking feature. So if you are a Garmin user, in the last couple of weeks, it'll be probably over a month by the time you're actually hearing this podcast episode where it is scheduled to be released. You would have gotten a notification through your Garmin app that there is a new nutrition tracking feature that has been built right into your Garmin Connect app. And of course, as a dietitian, this caught my attention right away because anything nutrition related is interesting. And I definitely wanted to give it a try and see how does it compare to all of the other tracking programs and all of the other ways and options that we have to track our food, and just kind of talk a little bit about my thoughts, who I think this specific feature might be really good for, who I think maybe it isn't good for, and then what are some ways that we can look at our food intake and kind of monitor what we're eating, but in a way that maybe doesn't require a tremendous amount of our time. Because that's always the give and take of food tracking. And there are different features and different features even within the Garmin nutrition option that have tried to reduce, I would say, some of the workload and some of the time that tracking takes and especially tracking well takes. But I think we're not there yet. I just don't think that we've quite reached a point where this can really be a hands-off, not labor-intensive thing to take on. So anyway, let's get into it. The nutrition tracking feature is part of Garmin's Garmin Plus subscription. So the Garmin Plus subscription is a paid add-on to just the regular Garmin Connect features. But what I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed lately, is that there are actually a number of popular tracking apps are getting a little bit skimpier on what's being offered with their free versions. There are a lot more features that are starting to be put behind paywalls. I'm not up to date necessarily on the prices of all the different options. So how does the Garmin Plus subscription compare to maybe using a MyFitnessPal or Chronometer subscription instead? It'd be worth a look though. So if you're interested and you're a Garmin user, if you're already paying for a Garmin Plus subscription, plus another food tracking app, this in the long run might actually save you a fair bit of money if you're just able to kind of get two birds with one stone. There are fewer and fewer free tracking apps, of course, ones that aren't like full of ads and all kinds of stuff like that. Fewer and fewer free apps. Or at least ones that all of like the features that we really want or really need are going to be behind those paywalls. The other nice thing, about kind of having this like all in one with the Garmin and, having your fitness tracking and your nutrition tracking kind of all in one place is that there's no need to now integrate two apps. And if you're not super tech savvy, this can be a real pain is to, have all of this connected and to have them talking to each other to upload and what happens if it's not working and that sort of thing. So sometimes just having it all in one place is a benefit. Because this is a new feature that Garmin has just released at the beginning of 2026, I haven't yet had the experience to see like how does it adjust things like nutrition targets based on training demands, based on volume. It has all of your exercise data. So realistically, this could be a really great way to have your nutrition provide more kind of recommendations or suggestions or adjust your targets as you go, like as your volume builds, especially if you're using a Garmin training plan and it knows what you're planning to do. Like I could see some really cool integrations and sort of some really cool predictions and adjustments and kind of guiding you on your nutrition a little bit more than what we typically get or typically see with just the simple tracking apps. So basically what I'm getting at is like, you know, how it is right now is these apps themselves are very passive, right? It's just sitting there. You have to put in what you're eating. And if you need to adjust what you're eating, you need to know that you need to adjust what you're eating, right? And this is a big reason why people come and work with someone like me, a sport dietitian, because I can help you set those targets, tell you what should your calorie target be, how many grams of carbohydrates or protein or fiber do you need to be getting in a day to set those goals to make sense for your training demands. But if you had this function of the app that is providing the training plan also giving you those guidance, that guidance around your eating, if it was well done, right? Like if the maths and the numbers make sense, it could kind of guide you and give you those recommendations of how much you should be eating as your training volume builds. And, those are just some interesting features and kind of, things that would be cool to see if this, if this kind of sticks around and if they continue to build on this feature. Not that I'm trying to put myself out of a job or anything like that. I think that athletes will probably always need a little bit more than just what you can get from an app. The same way that people still hire run coaches, even though there's lots of apps that do run programming. But there's a lot of potential and opportunity here. Okay. So anyway, my personal experience with using the app, there were some things that I really liked and then some things that I think were misses. Again, though, this is a brand new feature. This just has dropped in the last couple of weeks. So I would also give Garmin a little bit of a chance to maybe do some updates, put in some new things, get some feedback from users. And I think eventually this could be a really cool cool piece that would definitely be in competition with, MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or Lose It or the Weight Watchers app or all the other ones that are out there that are very popular. So first things first, as you do, anybody who's used one of these programs before knows, you know how this stuff works. You start by putting in your goals, weight loss, weight maintenance, weight gain. I'm fairly certain that Garmin already had my height, weight, age info in there, but I might have had to like confirm it or something like that, depending on how often you update your weight in Garmin. And then, of course, it already has all of my fitness data. So it already has all of my workouts because it's what I use to track my workouts. So it knows my volume of training, right? And so then it set out my calorie and macro targets. So the calorie target that it provided me, I thought was reasonable. I put in that I wanted to maintain my current weight. So the numbers that it gave me should have been, what I would consider to be like maintenance, could have very close to my actual calorie and nutrient requirement recommendations. So I thought the calories were pretty reasonable. But the macro targets I thought were a bit strange. Like the protein target was very high. And the carbs were quite low. Like the carbohydrate recommendation was under 40%. And the protein was, I think, over 2 grams per kilo of my body weight. So yes, at this point in time, like as I'm recording this episode, I'm not in my highest volume training season right now. I'm kind of just starting to get into a little bit of base building, mostly focusing on speed work right now. So my overall mileage is definitely at the lowest it's been in a long time because I was training for the New York City Marathon last year. Basically, most of the year I spent training for the New York City Marathon. So I'd be very curious to kind of see, like, as my mileage rebuilds, I get ready for my next half marathon, what kind of happens with those targets. So anyway, I was able to go in and obviously shift my targets to what I thought was more appropriate, just given my expertise and knowledge. But I'd be curious to know kind of where those numbers came from and those recommendations, because they were like a little bit different than what I would suggest, definitely as a sport dietitian. So as somebody who has pretty extensive experience with food tracking, different food tracking apps, looking at people's food tracking data, teaching other people how to track their food and all of the things. I mean, I have been doing this work since this work was created. I mean, I remember when food tracking apps even became a reality. I mean, I remember not having food tracking apps and having to do this like by hand on a spreadsheet. So I've been around. I've seen all the, all the different variations of the interfaces and the databases and the information we can get and all of the things and all of the features. So I did find Garmin's nutrition tracking interface a little bit less user friendly than some of the other apps that I've used. It's very similarly set up to the fitness features. So if you're quite comfortable with the fitness features in Garmin and kind of going around finding different data on Garmin, then I think you probably will find this to be similar. But if you're coming from using other tracking, like food tracking apps, and you switch to using Garmin for food and you don't have a ton of experience with like the other Garmin features, I would say that this interface is a little bit less user friendly than some of the other ones. There were some small things that I found kind of strange, or like I just couldn't figure out how to do them. And of course, it's coming from somebody who's got, a decent amount of experience. So this program is meal focused in the sense that it automatically wants you to be clicking to track your breakfast, lunch, dinner. So rather than it being like, okay, I'm going to search for a food and then I'm going to decide what time of day I'm putting that food in, I'm clicking on, okay, this is my range for breakfast between say 7 and 9 a.m. or whatever. You can set up your own meal slots. So you're clicking on the meal slot and tracking breakfast or tracking lunch or tracking dinner. There's no automatic slot for snacks. So that was confusing for me at first. I'm like, well, how do I track things that weren't breakfast, lunch, supper? Like, how do I kind of categorize a snack? So what you're shown is like your day view with like hour by hour. You would have to click on a time outside of a meal slot, then search for the food, and then it would slot it as a snack because you clicked outside of one of those meal windows. So you can adjust the meal windows, but there isn't like an automatic snack section. So anyway, you can add snacks. It just took me a little bit of time to figure that part out. But yeah, it's very sort of meal focused of like, what are you eating for your breakfast, lunch, and supper, which I don't hate. I do think that everyone needs to be eating breakfast, lunch, and supper. I think 3 meals a day is important if we want to meet our protein and fiber goals. The other thing, though, that I did not love about this program compared to a lot of other apps that I've used in the past is there's no recipe feature. And so this is something that I think a lot of people are going to have a big challenge with, because basically how we typically, how it would be easiest to do things is if you're making like a soup or a casserole or, you're batch cooking something, right? Like you're making a large dish of something and you're going to batch cook it for a few days. You're going to have leftovers. You're going to share it with your family. The easiest way to do that with most of these programs is to have a recipe feature where you're going to put in like, okay, I used a whole can of tomatoes. I put in a whole can of black beans. I put in a, cup of cheese or whatever, right? You're putting in the whole recipe. Then you're going to divide it by the number of portions. And then you're going to track a portion of that as your meal for the day, right? You've got that recipe now saved in the program. And so you can just go back and pull that in. If you say, have that for like leftovers for lunch the next day, right? That recipe is saved. You know how many portions it is, you can put it in. This is very easy, especially some of the programs now that like the program that I currently use with my clients, you can actually like pull in like from a website, you can just pull in the nutrition facts, right? So you don't actually have to manually add all of these ingredients. So what I found out the hard way is that in the Garmin nutrition tracking feature, you can save a common meal that you eat. So like, let's say you often have, oatmeal with a couple hard-boiled eggs and a banana for breakfast, right? Maybe that's like a common breakfast. You can save that as like a common breakfast meal, but you don't have the option to like divide it as a recipe and divide that into like portions if you say cook a whole bunch of steel cutouts all at once. I found this out the hard way when I made a smoothie for me and my kids to share. And I mean, my kids just go absolutely bonkers on smoothies. So, like, I have to make a blender full of smoothie, a massive big blender full of smoothie, and I get like my 1 cup and they will drink the rest of it. So, I put in this entire smoothie recipe of like 2 bananas, 3 cups of fruit, a cup of juice, a cup of milk, a cup of yogurt, like half a bag of spinach, like everything that went into this monster smoothie. And then I realized that, oh, no, that I can't now say that, oh, well, I had like 1/3 of this recipe. It had tracked the entire thing. So then I had to go back and try to figure out, okay, well, what is like the portion that I had of each of these individual items that went into the smoothie? Because it's a meal, not a recipe feature. So just be aware. If you are someone who is cooking for a family, if you are batch cooking things, if you are often eating with others where you're like sharing, and it's very hard to then figure out, like, okay, I'm making a stir fry for dinner. Well, I might have, I put like a tablespoon of oil into my frying pan. I then have to divide that, right? And okay, I've had about a quarter tablespoon. How much of the broccoli did I eat? How much of this? Like, it can be a lot harder than just saying, okay, this is what went into the whole dish. I'm going to estimate that I had, 25% of it. So if you're someone who's cooking for a family, like I often am, you may find that this particular tracking program does not work for you because it's a lot more labor intensive to have to like estimate how much you're actually having. Now, very interestingly, there was a feature in the Garmin nutrition tracking program that I have not seen in a long time. I actually used to use a program called Quinoa with my clients, that this was sort of like their hallmark feature, was that you can take a photo of your meal and then it takes that photo and analyzes the meal. So if you take a picture of your plate and on your plate you have some fish, some rice, some green beans, you take a photo and it will then pull up that you had fish, rice, and green beans and be able to then include that in your nutrition analysis and log that meal. And so it tries to analyze the meal anyway. Years ago, when I used a program like this, it just wasn't that good. It just wasn't that accurate. The biggest issue is not so much that it can't tell what food you're having, but it's the portion sizes. Like, it's very hard for the photo, like from a photo, for it to be able to estimate the amount of things that you're having. So I was playing around with this a little bit. I took a picture of some carrots, potatoes, and chicken. And so, yes, it very easily could recognize that this container had carrots, potatoes, and chicken. But then when I went back and checked the weight of what it had estimated versus what the actual weight of the food was, like, it was off by so much. It was so, so inaccurate. And to me, like, if you have to then go back in, double check the weight and like update it to be correct, I don't know if that's really that helpful of a feature. I've also used with clients over the years, which I actually do like in a lot of situations, is just having people take a photo of their meal. And, I like that because I can tell a lot from a photo. Like, as a dietitian, there's a ton of information and a ton of knowledge that I can gain about your eating habits by just looking at photos of what you eat, right? Both in terms of portion sizes and, everything else, meal timing, balance, etc. Yes, okay, we're not going to have like those sort of very detailed things like how much cooking oil you maybe used or stuff like that. But you wouldn't have that with this anyway. You'd have to make sure that you're adding in extras like cooking oil to, this dish of the carrots, potatoes, and chicken, right? I roasted those potatoes and carrots with some oil on it, right? But yeah, so it's not going to give you the most accurate picture. And the other issue that I had is that it doesn't actually save your photo. So you take that picture, but then it pulls up the individual stock images for those things. Like your photo isn't now there logged. Because, the nice thing is that if you're like sitting down with a dietitian and you've got all of these photos tracked, you could like go through together and look at your photos of what you've taken. And that gives you a lot of information about how you've been eating. But I didn't see the actual photos that I was taking stored anywhere. It was just using it to pull up the estimated foods and then amounts of foods. And like I took a picture of like this Costco sized container of cottage cheese I had bought, 'cause I just wanted to see like, would it recognize cottage cheese? Yes, it had no problem recognizing that that was cottage cheese, but it told me that that was like, what did it say? Like 200 grams of cottage cheese. Meanwhile, this container of cottage cheese was 2 kilos. Like it was the entire big Costco thing. It's just not that good at measuring depth and accurately measuring amounts. So if you were to take a photo and go with because it's going to tell you how much it thinks is there. And if you're going to track it and you're going to just go with what it's saying, you're going to be wrong most of the time. Like, did it do a pretty good job of telling me that my banana was a medium banana? Yeah, sure. Did I think that it was okay when it told me that like the bell pepper was like about 1 cup of bell pepper? Like, yeah, maybe it was a whole bell pepper. I didn't cut it up to double check if it was a cup or not once I chopped it, but like not too bad for like those simple individual items. But once we're getting into plates of food, containers of food, mixed dishes, a stir fry, a stew, a casserole, like things with ingredients, like it's never going to know that there's milk or cream in a sauce that you made to like put on something, right? Like it's never going to be able to get that depth of the ingredients, and especially nuanced things like, are you using milk or are you using heavy cream in a recipe? But when it comes to the data that we're getting, the information we're getting from food tracking, that information is incredibly important, right? Like that makes a big difference if we're cooking with 35% whipping cream or 1% milk, right? The calories, the fat, the saturated fat, like how much oil is going into a recipe. All of these things matter a lot. So if you want accurate numbers and very detailed information, then you need to be very detailed with your input. And that does mean measuring, weighing, including things like cooking oils and salad dressings and all those little extra bits and pieces as accurately as you can. But if you are okay with giving up some of the data and some of the specifics around the data to do things like taking a photo, then I think just take a photo and don't worry about having it be like poorly analyzed by the photo feature. Like just take a photo. And there are apps that are free that are specifically just for taking and tracking food photos. I do like them because they actually very nicely line up and show your kind of day of pictures. And I do like that as an option. So anyway, at the end of the day, I think that having a nutrition tracking feature here in Garmin is going to be really helpful and really useful for the right person. And what I mean by that is if you're somebody who's kind of just like cooking, eating for yourself, you only want calorie and macronutrient data, and the meals that you eat are relatively simple. Like you're not going to be inputting a lot of complex recipes. You're not cooking in a lot of batches. You're not making large amounts of things that would be like hard to then estimate and kind of turn into what you're having for an individual meal. And if you're already a Garmin Plus user, then I think this can be a really good feature that like saves you from needing multiple apps, and especially will save you from then paying for multiple apps again if you already have a Garmin Plus subscription. But if you're looking for more depth with your nutrition data, if you're looking for more information, if you want, more details about the nutrients, if you want to be able to track more than just kind of your calories and macros, in here, you can click on an individual food and you can see the micronutrient data, a small handful of micronutrients, and you can see like fiber and your macros and calories, obviously. But I could not find summaries or even the ability to set targets for things beyond calories and macros. So if you want to be more, looking more closely at tracking fiber, if you want to make sure you're getting enough iron or calcium or vitamin C or zinc or, whatever it might be, if you want to go that next step, This program just doesn't have those capabilities, at least not yet. Not saying that that won't change, and maybe they will expand the different nutrition summaries and some of the other features and analysis that you're able to get from this. But for now, it is a very basic program that is really just focused on simple foods, simple meals, and looking at your calories and your macronutrient distribution. So I think that there are a lot of strengths and benefits to this, especially for the right person who, like I said, just needs something very simple. You don't need to have, you're not looking for a million nutrients to track the way that I am as a dietitian. I want all the data. I want to make sure that we're getting in enough magnesium and all those things along the way. But if you're not looking at that, if you're really just focused on the bigger picture, and you just want that, and again, it's already going to be integrated into a subscription that you might already be paying for, I think that this is can be a really great add-on and a really great feature to use. But as an overall nutrition tracking program, stacked up against all the other options that are out there, I do think that there are better ones that go deeper, give you better data, better features for a similar price, or even with some of the free versions, you can get all this and more. Personally, in my extensive experience as a dietitian, been doing this for over a decade now, coming up to even closer to 15 years. Been doing this for a long time. I'm an OG with the tracking. I've used just about every program out there. I've seen just about every program out there with all of my clients over the years. And what I've really landed on that I use with my clients is a program called Eat Love. What I like about it is that it doubles as a planning and tracking tool. So it allows you to track your food, but also plan your meals in advance so you can kind of get recipes and meal suggestions right there in the app, which I think is great. We get a very detailed diet analysis, all the macros, all the micros, everything. And of course, you're getting those personalized suggestions based on your goals. So there are lots of great programs out there. If you want to go deeper with your nutrition this year, if you really want to understand your fueling requirements, how to eat for the demands of your training, how to adjust your eating day to day for what your workouts are, how to properly prepare for your races, and really just like using nutrition as the tool that it can be to optimize your performance. Tracking is one tool that we can use. I think tracking is a great place to start for a lot of people, but we want to go beyond that. We want to learn what else is out there. How else can I eat well without needing to track and spend that 20 to 30 minutes every single day meticulously tracking everything I put in my mouth. And I'm here to tell you that there are other ways. There are better ways. I think starting with this, getting some good information, making some new habits, learning, and then shifting away from tracking is really the way to go. This is exactly what I help my clients do, both in my one-on-one coaching and in my online program, the Fuel Train Recover Club. So if you want to learn more about that I would love to help you. You can find all of the links to all of the different ways that we can work together in the show notes. And if you want a really simple first step to just looking at your nutrition, maybe you have just recently even discovered sport nutrition and you're like, wait a minute, what? Like my food has an impact on my running? Like I had no idea. This is all new to me. Or maybe you've just started running. You are very interested in nutrition, but you want to understand how nutrition and running kind of go together, or, what are some of the ins and outs of that? I created a free fueling audit for runners. And so this fueling audit allows you to take a look at your current eating habits, any of the most common signs and symptoms of underfueling, right? Not fueling your body adequately for your training, and walks you through how you can start to correct those gaps in your nutrition. So definitely recommend checking out that free fueling audit, and of course, going over to the link in the show notes to get that and finding out all the other ways that we can work together. All right, that is it for today's episode. I really hope that you found it helpful. If you've been thinking about trying the Garmin nutrition tracking feature, my thoughts and who it might be best for. All right, that's it for today. We will see you right back here next week. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.